Yeah, we're live.
We are live. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. I want you to notice before we get any farther, I want you to see Josh's shirt. This is possibly the most amazing shirt I've ever seen.
It's interesting you like this one. I love this one, but like I have really bright ones with monsters on it, and this is one of my favorites. But you've noticed this one.
Yes,
So
it's very
awesome.
It's subtle to some extent, but just amazing to look at.
Well, thank you. So obviously I'm excited about Halloween, and people are like, why in the world do you have Halloween fabric wearing a Halloween shirt in June?
Because
Do you know why?
Yes.
Because, and I'm going to get the name right, we have a spooktacular June Jamboree going on.
Woo! Wow.
Like fifth time's the charm.
And that is a name.
That's right. So the idea is that we love Christmas in July, and we're still going to do that big, but Halloween is such a huge part of my life, which is possibly a little sad, but also just fun. And we have so much amazing Halloween fabric that we were like, let's do it in June. Mm-hmm. Halloween in June. I don't think anybody's ever done it before. So we're trendsetters.
No, and it gives you an opportunity to get all your Halloween bags for your kids, a quilt for display, all kinds of stuff. It gives you time to get all that done before Halloween.
Yeah, and we have a lot of fabric. We had a lot of fabric left over, but we have a lot of new Halloween fabric too. So even if you were here last Halloween, which you remember us, I'm sure, I had like animatronic clowns, and I went a little overboard from what I've been told. I think it was awesome. But it was fun, and we're going to do it again. So it is what it is. But the new fabric is absolutely stunning. So let's see, where should I start? Well, this is a really fun table runner that we had done. So we're trying to make sure we do a lot of samples in the store because there's so much fabric and so many cool collections that it's almost, I can see people, they skip past it because it's overwhelming. There's too much, you know? Mm-hmm. So if you make samples, they usually don't miss it.
That's right.
So reversible,
really
which is really fun. And then we have this nice Halloween bag, and I can't remember the pattern, but I'm sure we can get it. Kristen made this for us with some of our fun fabric. Is it picking it up all right, Tony?
Yeah, it's picking up great.
All right, awesome. And then let's see, my new.
And that's my husband's size bag for Halloween, for trick or treating.
It's a serious trick or treating bag.
Yes, it is.
Forget the pillowcase. So there is a bunch of fabric, and they're not all a part of the same collection. It's just I picked some of my favorites. So this is Rachel Hauer's new line, which probably is my favorite.
Tell them who Rachel Hauer is.
Rachel Hauer is an amazing artist from Free Spirit, and the reason this conversation came up with Joann and I is somebody goes, this fabric collection's it's weird, and not talk about this one of her other lines, the ones with moths and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it is weird in the best sense. And then we talked about it, and I said, well, she's Tula Pink's tattoo artist. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they're like, I love it. Because our diehard Tula Pink people don't, it's great. So, but Rachel Hauer is a phenomenal artist. Look at that. That one's got what is it? A bat, a crow, a cat, and a rat.
Say that 5 times.
Right. I absolutely love that. So that obviously you can see the same colorway, and it's a rich teal. It is. Whew. And there's probably 7 other bolts in that collection.
There's like
12? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot. I'm going to save that one because that's probably mine. Look how fun that is. Come on, Dr. Seuss.
Is that a Halloween Dr.
It is a Halloween Dr. Seuss. So you got to have something for the kids. And then look at this. This is like a vintage Halloween print, which is just so stinking cool. Super cute. We got a little bit of something for everybody, especially when it comes to Halloween. But look at that one is just pretty. As pretty as you can get with ghosts, right?
Yeah.
It's soft. It's funny. I was like, it's like a really soft, subtle ghost print.
There's a little mushroom in there too.
With little mushrooms. It's adorable. I absolutely love it. And there's so much more, but obviously we only have so much space and so much time. So you'll have to come in. We're doing, thank you, 25% off all Halloween all month long. So now is the time to stock up.
That's right.
And fall. So we've got some non-Halloween pumpkins that are super cute. There's one line that's super artsy that I love, but I guess Halloween/fall themed fabric is all 25% off all month long. So, and this is a make and take, or a make it and take it, whatever you want to call it. So we will be doing all month long little make and takes or make it and take it. What's the I think it's make and take.
Make it take.
Yeah, little make and takes in the store. So come in, sit down at a machine, and you can try out a machine, but make something fun like this. Tony came up with this. It's a pot holder. No, it's not. It's a jar opener. I guess you could make it a pot holder. It's a bowl holder.
Except
it would melt.
It would. Don't do that. It's a jar.
Not a cook.
It's
here.
a jar opener. Microwave. But what's cool is there's a magnet sewn into it, so you can slap it up on the fridge. And I tested it; it worked.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got these fun little make and takes. We've got some like a lanyard, I think, planned, a key fob, and maybe like a trick-or-treating bag. And I don't know. We're going to come up with it as the month goes along. So the idea is just to get you excited, get you in here, to try out a new machine. There's zero pressure. It's not a sales pitch. I promise. I'll be nice. But it allows you just to make something fun. So bring the kiddos in. Just come in and hang out with us and get some sale fabric.
I love this idea of the make and take and trying out a machine, because there's nothing worse than going into a sewing machine store and having that stiff little piece of fabric that they give you to try it out with, and it really bears no resemblance to anything you would ever sew with.
So it's funny. So we also have that stiff little denim piece of fabric. I think everybody does. It's a really nice demonstration to show somebody that you can do 6 layers of denim with the machine, and I think that's why most shops. That's where I learned to use it, because that does show them, okay, it's durable. But you're right. It has for a quilter, they're like, I'm not picturing me doing that. So You're absolutely right. So that's fun. Behind us, just another panel. We've got a handful of panels, which are also 25% off. And I got this one. This is more fun, cutesy. And then I've got actually some kind of darker, serious skeletons, which I guess we'll call scary, but more adult. So, I mean, I've really tried to cover the gamut of what Halloween fabrics are available. And it comes in 2 colorways and wall down. 2 colorways. So anyway, you can tell I love Halloween. You already know that. So we're trying to get you guys to come in and get excited as well. And that's the idea.
Very cool.
Classes coming up. Let's see, I got my notes. Sewing studio every Monday, which has been great. All you do is pay $5. You can come in, use our classroom. We're here to help if you're working on a project. I'd love to see some new people coming in. I love the core group of people that come in. It's a really educated. They're serious sewers and they're really good. So what I've seen a few times, people will come in who are a little bit nervous because they're newer. Well, all they're doing is getting free education and just meeting people with some serious skills and feeding off of each other. And it's really cool. So I encourage new sewers to also join us. I know it can be intimidating when you walk in and everybody kind of knows each other, but it's a super welcoming group. We're super friendly, right?
For
So
sure.
I want to make sure that you guys know you're always welcome. I think we send that vibe pretty good, though.
And it's always nice to quilt with somebody who's better than you are. It helps to increase your own skills and your own confidence, and you learn from each other. And
I hear people going to the quilt shows and they come back and they're just like, oh gosh, they're so good. And they're all, you can tell that they feel defeated. Do the opposite. You should feel inspired.
Yeah.
Like motivated. Okay, now you've got some goals. Don't, everybody's different. Work at your own speed. Just enjoy the process.
That's right.
Right? See, I listen.
It's a journey.
It's funny. After that was last week's.
Right.
We talked about enjoying the process and the little mistakes, that happy little accidents. We had that conversation like 3 times that day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it really resonates with people. It's
That's
true.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Embroidery club, bag lady club. What else?
Saturday morning we'll do a class video.
Class videos coming on Saturdays, but no, what other clubs? We got the
Serger Club.
Serger Club, thank you. The Embroidery Club, and then the Bag Lady Club. Those are the solid clubs. Our Solaris Club is a hands-on class, so I kind of keep that separate, but that's on and rocking. This week's or this month's Solaris Club is full. Sorry, but you can sign up for the next one. Kids classes. Should have brought the surfboards. You want to grab them?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So we've got some really fun kids classes planned this month. I don't know if you've seen, but they're doing like a bed caddy,
Yeah.
a book reading pillowcase. I'm bag, maybe a drawstring bag.
Mhm.
The whole what I love about kids classes is they can make something in that class, finish it, and then take it home
And use it.
but they're proud of it. They can
Right.
actually finish it. And then of course, we've been talking about not crazy. Well, she is a little crazy, but in the best way. Craftsy Carla, and the paint parties that we got going on. So she's going to do one for the kids.
Oh, how cool.
How cute is that?
And that's not too hard for the kids.
No. So we talked about this too on our live on Saturday. It's amazing. So this is the next adult paint party. This is the kids. Okay. So the adults will 100% need the flip-flops to be drawn on there so that they can just paint like basically a color by number sort of thing. The kids, you give them a blank slate and a paintbrush, they're going to go for it. There's zero fear.
Yeah,
if you think about that. So they're going to make their own turtles. In fact, they don't want you to draw it for them. That's a coloring book. So it's really interesting to see the difference. My son, prime example, like if I draw something, I say, okay, color this in. He's like, no, I want to draw it. So
that's an artist in the making.
Oh, I hope so. Knock on wood. He does love drawing, and it's become really fun to like paint with him and stuff. It's cool. So that is, I don't know the date. I'm sorry, but cutupandsew.com. It's on there. As is this one for the adults. Really cool. Yeah, it is cool. And I think the actual painting is going to be larger.
Yeah, 12 by 16.
But 12 by 16. But this is a great sample. This is a really nice little painting too.
Is.
We did the sewing machine. We did the quilt block. So we're going to keep the painting parties going. Because Carla's awesome, but it's something else we can offer in the shop. It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. You can have your own little artist wall.
Absolutely, which we need to do. We need to find a good way to display all of our customers' artwork and stuff, whether it's quilts and paintings and our quilt show that we'll have eventually at some point.
It'll be fun eventually.
Right. And then the last thing is an intro to applique, which is, we haven't had that before. That's why I'm mentioning that. That's really cool. We'll probably talk more about that on Saturday. That's on the 22nd. And then the sleep in your own bed retreat. Sleep in your bed retreat. Sleep in your own bed retreat. I say it
It's
right.
a lot of words.
I know.
Yeah. And you don't have to bring your bed.
No, we can set up cots. No, sleep at home, but bring your machine and leave it for 2 days. And Tony's got a really cool mystery quilt that she's working on with you guys. Again, we'll talk about it again more in depth on Saturday. There's only 4 spots left though. So if you're interested, call before Saturday and we can let you talk to Tony and answer any questions you have. What are the dates?
24th and 25th.
24th and 25th.
Friday, Saturday.
Perfect. And there's a ton more classes, but I'm going to stop talking.
This is what we're doing Saturday.
Because people want to see what Joann's got going on. And I need to jump on here because I haven't said good morning to anybody. I'm assuming I'm assuming somebody's on here.
A few.
All right. Let me turn the volume down so we don't have an echo. Good morning, Linda. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning, some other people. Marilee. It says 3 other people watching, but I don't know who you are. So good morning to you as well. All right. What do we got, Joann?
Okay, well,
let me move this stuff out of your way.
Today we're going to talk about labels and labeling your quilt. And last week I talked a little bit about it, and in the segment of mistakes that people make. And the mistake is not labeling your quilt. And so I started, when I came up with that as a mistake, or when I was shown that as a mistake, because I don't have any signed quilts. I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about the importance of that. And when I looked into it, they said, they reminded me that every artist signs their work, and it should be the same with a quilt. A quilt is your artwork, and you should have a signature on it in some way or another. And it can be as simple as you want, or it can be as complex. And part of the reason is it identifies as your quilt to begin with. So when time goes by and you're no longer here, or I'm no longer here, your family or whoever gets that can see, oh, grandma made this and she made it in 2023 or whatever. And so it identifies your quilt as your own. It tells people when it was made. And even those first quilts that you make that you think, oh my goodness, you look back on them and you think, oh my goodness, what a mess that was. It's nice to have a little label on there so that people know this was my first quilt. This is where it all started.
And you can see, oh, that's right, that was my first quilt.
That's right.
It's a little record.
That's right.
It's
Exactly.
a piece of history for real. So
it's a piece of your own history for sure.
Yeah, I love that.
So, so anyway, I was convicted at that point and decided, yes, that putting a label on your quilt is important. So I started looking into a variety of different ways of making a label. And one of the things that seemed to be universal with everything that I looked at was plan your label before you finish your quilt. Start thinking about that label before you've gotten to the point of you've put binding on, you're done with it, it's put away, and you no longer want to think about doing anything with that quilt. So you plan it in advance. So I've brought a couple of things. One, I showed this last week. I'll show it again this week. This is not where you start with a label. It's just, you want to make your label as simple as possible, especially when you're first starting out. You want something that is doable and that you're not going to be spending as much time making your label as you did making the quilt. So if you're thinking something like that, get a frame, put it in a frame.
God, I wish you could like make this more simple though. Simpler, I don't think is a word. More simple because it's so stinking cute.
It is cute.
Her last name's Lamb, so just in case you didn't put the put it together.
Yeah, it was a great idea. It was the lamb, and then whatever I was going to write was going to go right in the middle part, and I would make it and use the fabrics that were from the quilt to put it in. And obviously this one never even made it onto the quilt.
You made it into a frame.
Made it into a frame.
You should put a label on your label.
I should. So anyway, there's a couple of different ways you can go. Now, if you happen to be one of those people who are really into the embroidery machine thing, and doing a label with your embroidery machine is a great idea. Now, I did not make this because I'm not an embroiderer, but a friend of mine made it. And it's actually to go with a quilt that's going to my grandson's. And it has a lot of elephants on it, and it has numbers and letters and all kinds of stuff. It's a kid's quilt. And so it has a little poem that goes, "The elephants went for a walk today. What did they see as they went on their way?" And so it gives the kids that little poem. That little poem makes it into sort of an I Spy. What do you see? Do you see three monkeys? Do you see whatever? So, and then there's the piece of fabric is big enough that when I finish the quilt someday, I can put my name and the date at the bottom of it and say who it's from. So it's big enough to be a label. This one may actually go on the front of the quilt as opposed to the back, which is where you typically put a label. But it may go on the front because it's a poem that goes with this, or it may go on the back. I don't know.
Cute.
So that's one way of making a label. For this,
do you want to see that label here? Let me use my camera because I think they'll be able to see this better.
For this quilt, this is going to be a quilt that's for me. It's not going to be given away. It's not going to go in a show. It's just for me. And so for the legacy idea of it, of what gets left behind, I put just a very simple label on it. Typically, the label goes in the bottom right-hand corner of the back of your quilt. Somehow I managed to get that wrong. But so what this is just a square piece of fabric. And what I did was I put the fabric onto a piece of freezer paper. I designed the label, simple as it is, on my computer. I put the freezer paper through my printer, and then just cut it into a square, folded it into a triangle, and put it on the back of my quilt. Now, the advantage of this is you can sew this top portion and adhere it to your quilt, or you can leave it open, and maybe you can tuck a little card in there that maybe says how you take care of the quilt, or any further history. Like, for example, this quilt I personally named as Painted Ladies because there's a lot of very colorful butterflies on it. However, it's actually based on the design is actually based on a quilt by Camille Rustelli and her design of the swoon block. So I might put on that card in tucked in this little pocket where the idea for the quilt came from. When you are designing a label, you want to include the basics: who, what, when, where, and why. Who made the quilt? Maybe who it's for, when it was made. So, for example, this one says May 2023 because that's when I made it. What, when, where. It includes where you made it. So mine includes Palm Coast, Florida. And if there is a why, for example, if you're making it for a baby or for a wedding, you might include that also.
For so and so.
Yeah, for so and so, exactly.
Question about somebody asked. Marilee asked it. Would you put labels on charity quilts?
That's a good question. I do so for with one of the local churches, hospice group, and we do put a label on it. They're all pre-printed. They come through. I think she gets them through Etsy, and Etsy's a great place to look for pre-printed labels where you can actually design your own labels. But this particular one, it just is a roll of labels, and we cut a little label. We tuck it in the binding when we're putting the binding on, and it says where it came from. And yes, I think you do label those. You don't put your own name on it though.
Yeah, and I think it probably depends on the charity. Like we do a lot of quilts for Project Linus.
They have their own labels.
And they have, I was going to say, I think they have their own.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would just, if you're making it to donate it, like if that is the sole purpose of starting the quilt, I would ask whoever the charity that you're donating it to.
Good point.
If it's an old quilt that you have and it has a label on it, they're not going to say, no, we're not going to take it. Right. So by all means, that, but I think if you're intending it for Project Linus, for example, just ask them, or I think they make their own labels. But
yeah. And that's a good point. But there was a story about some Canadian people who made hundreds of quilts that went to the servicemen in Germany and during the war. And very few of those were labeled. Some of them were, but it was amazing to see those that there was a story there. There was a story for the quilt. That quilt was started in Canada and ended up in Europe and during the war. And that story is important to be passed on. Cool. And what you do as a quilter is important. It's important to it's important to you as a crafter, but it's also important to the people who receive it. Some of the things that you can use to make a label are, you can, like I said before, you can put a piece of, put your fabric on a piece of freezer paper so that it stays nice and still. You can handwrite your label. And one of the things that I like about the handwriting part is that preserves your signature. So if this is going to a person in your family, that signature is something that will live past you and that will be treasured by the people who are your family that receive that.
And they have really nice, if you really want it to stand out, they have really nice fabric markers. I mean, so you can make it permanent if you just wanted to handwrite it.
Don't use Sharpies.
Don't use Sharpies. Yeah, it'll bleed like crazy.
Sharpies seem to be a question. I read as many articles that said use a Sharpie that said use a micron pen, and they talked about setting your Sharpie ink once you've written with it, and you just press the area so that it stays, so that it will set that writing. I don't really know the answer. I know that Sharpies move a lot more easily on the fabric than the micron pen, but the micron pen are what most people will recommend because it's permanent, it doesn't bleed, and it's nice fine line. So
we have, not to interrupt, I'm sorry. If you like the thickness of the Sharpie and the way that it writes, they have fabric markers, that's what it's specifically made for, which is nice. And not the friction pins. Don't use those.
That might not last very long.
Those will go away. Yeah. But yeah, I'm be interested with the Sharpie if it matters if it's been washed or, like you said, ironed or something. Because anytime that I've tried to just do a little something, you just touch it, it goes, it like sucks up the,
So if you're thinking of doing Sharpie, so this was done with the Sharpie.
No way. That
yeah.
was?
Mhm. This was done with a Sharpie, and I did press
How
it
thin is your
afterwards.
Sharpie?
It's a really thin one.
So,
Nice.
I don't know if I've ever seen a Sharpie like this. So there is probably a difference. This is an ultra fine Sharpie, which probably makes a huge difference. I've only
if you're
used
gonna
the
use the big one,
standard.
oh.
Well, I didn't use the big old, but like the small, but it looks more like a felt tip,
Mhm.
and that bleeds.
Mhm.
This is probably okay, actually. That's a really fine.
It is a
I
fine.
didn't know this existed.
I know it all.
Joann does.
I can go home. This is awesome.
So another thing you can use is this is fabric that is already attached to a piece of backing, and you can put it through your inkjet printer. It does say that it's color fast and that you don't have to do anything to keep it from fading. That's what it says. I don't know that for sure.
Have you? Perfect segue, because Marie and I she came over. She goes, "Hey, can we get some of this so we can play?" And I was like, "Absolutely." You know, I mean,
Mhm.
I've never done it. Cool concept. Have either of you ever done? You have? Does it seem to work well?
Yeah, I like printed treasures.
What is this? What you did here?
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh,
It
fantastic!
looks great.
I was like, "Why are you grabbing your quilt?" Okay, so I am super excited to play with this, because the idea of putting a photo.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I'm really big, and I'm getting even deeper into the thread painting and everything. But there's a difference between a sketch thread painting look and a printed
And a printed
baby
photo.
picture.
So can you imagine giving your grandchild, maybe you've just had a grandchild and you've actually had an opportunity to hold it, and maybe there's a picture of that, and putting it on your label on the back of your quilt, that picture with your name and the date and the baby's name. I just thought that was a really cute thing. Or maybe a wedding photo just on the back on the label. I think there's a lot of just amazing possibilities.
Such a cool industry. They just keep coming up with new stuff, and I know that's not that new, but it's new to me.
Well, yeah,
You're learning.
Okay, so there's labels are only limited by your imagination. So
That's good.
you
Get
can do
creative.
whatever you want. It can be as big as you want. I saw one that was like this size on the back of a quilt, and they'd written, the appropriate thing, but then they'd written a poem on there for the people who are receiving it. So that's a fairly large thing.
I've seen these in the back of a quilt, like dead center, that's the focal point of the back, because it was so important. I think it was a poem or maybe even a letter or quote or something. And it was obviously, it wasn't, they wanted it to be seen. So I think it depends on what the purpose of your label is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's, you can even, if you like to embroider, if you do the embroidery thing, you could on the back of your quilt actually embroider on the fabric that's your backing. You could embroider your label on that. The first label
before you put the quilt together. That's a pro tip.
That would be good. The other thing you can do is along the bottom of your quilt. Now this would terrify me because I'd be afraid that I would ruin the quilt. But just right along the binding, right here, you can just write your name and the date, and then you have a signature on your quilt.
Yeah.
So simple to complex, to buy it from Etsy, to design your own. You can do anything, but just remember to label it. And and the last thing is that when you make it, the reason I didn't finish this binding was because I just wanted to show that when you actually go to sew it on, you're going to sew it into your binding. So this is actually sewn. When I put the binding on, I put the label on at the very same time.
Hold on, let me switch cameras here, Joann, so that they can see what you're doing here.
So actually, there's nothing to see. It was a good idea.
Oh.
But anyway, it's actually sewn into the binding. And
so this here, she had the clips on there, and then she just took them off.
Yeah. So it's sewn in. Now, the reason why you might sew it in is because I was told this years and years ago. So if your quilt gets stolen, it becomes very difficult to take that off. And or if it's lost or whatever, whoever gets it can't take it off. It's still. I've
happens a
actually
lot.
heard of it happening. It
There's
happens.
a special place, and you know where. My gosh.
Sarah, for somebody who would steal a quilt.
Yeah, I mean,
So
really.
anyway, you want to make that permanent as possible. Now, if you have a quilt, let's say you've listened to this and you're thinking, yeah, I think I probably should label some of my quilts. And you have some that are already done. They've got their binding on, they're hanging up, they're on a bed, whatever. But you decide you want to put a label on that.
When you decide to put the label on.
When you decide, that's right. So what you can do is make your label. Let's say this is a label, and it's all made nice and tiny like this. You can take your label, put it together with a piece of fusible interfacing. So you would cut the fusible interfacing to the size of your label, and then sew all the way around it, just like you would a pocket or whatever. Sew all the way around it, all four sides. Then cut a hole in the center, like X. Turn it right side out, and then you can press it onto the back of your quilt, and it will keep it nice and stable so that you will be able to keep it right where you want it the whole time. You just hand sew it on, and that gives you a nice label on the back of an already finished quilt. That's
Perfect.
right.
That's good. So label all of those quilts that you have in the stack in the corner, because you never know when you're going to give it away or find something to do with it.
That's right.
It's such a good point, labeling the quilts. I mean, it is. You're signing your piece of artwork. You know, it's as simple as that. And of course, most people, I think, put a label on it if it's a gift.
Right.
But even if it's your quilt that you love and you have, you know, you just never know.
Yeah. And I always felt like I didn't want to label it. I didn't want to be, to me, it was like it was a prideful thing. And I didn't want to.
But you should be proud of every quilt that you finish. I don't care. I have people come in here and they go, all right, I finished it. It's not perfect. And I'm like, well, hold on.
It looks good.
We're always our own worst critic,
That's
but
right.
like, it's like you still completed it. That's a huge, you know, accomplishment. Be proud of that. You completed a quilt. Sure, maybe there's some little things where you can improve, so do it next time. But to finish one is something, is a feat in itself. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
So it should always be labeled. And like I said, start thinking about it before you finish it. And you can do little scraps you can make a little patch out of scraps that are left over, or make a lamb.
Yeah, make a lamb.
Make a lamb.
Now you need to copyright that. Don't steal the lamb idea.
That's right.
Unless your last name's Lamb, I guess technically you probably wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no, that's right. So anyway, the other two things I wanted to show were finally the Friday class has a sample.
And oh boy, is it a sample. I love
Beautiful.
this quilt. I would hang this in my house.
Yes, that's where it's going to go.
In my house?
No, it's
Fantastic.
It's going to go in my house. It's going to hang there. So, so what I try to do with the Friday classes, I try and do one easy quilt and then alternate it with a more challenging quilt. This is the challenging quilt, and for a class where people are always talking and chatting and having a good time, this class is amazingly quiet.
They're so focused.
They are.
They've got their squares, and I just poke my head around to make sure, like,
are they still alive?
Are we good?
But everybody's very focused on this one. So I'm coming up with something a lot easier for the next quilt, which will start sometime, I don't know, in June or something like that. So anyway, this is finally the sample for Friday's quilt. It took me a while to get it.
And everybody's quilt is so different. I've said this about your class so many times, but it's so cool to see how different their flavors are. And so it just changes the look of every single quilt. It's so cool.
Well, you can talk panels next month.
Yeah, I'm looking at panels for next month, and some ideas of things that we can do with panels, and that'll only be a 4-week class, I think, and pretty simple.
We need to do a handful of panel focused classes, whether it's a quilting in the hoop, border panel class, or a quilt. There are so many amazing panels that are made now.
Yes.
I mean, I'm blown away by the artwork on these panels, and it's just so cool. When we first bought the shop, I was like, because up in Louisville, we didn't really do panels. And so when I bought the shop, there was so many panels, and I'm like, I want to get out of the panel game. And then I started meeting with the reps, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're in the panel game because they're so cool. Yeah. And so sometimes you don't want to chop up a gorgeous piece of art, the panel, but you want to make it your own. So then people are like, well, what do I add to it? And there's border prints or patterns that are out there, but
Mhm.
sometimes they're kind of boring. So get creative with it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what.
And it's really neat. Some of the just one big panel, it's difficult to make that look like a quilt that is not a panel that started out as a panel. But a lot of them now are coming out with different size squares, different size pieces. Those you can make into a quilt that you have no idea that it was a panel.
Oh,
And it was some of the I'm hoping to bring some of that aspect into the class and how we can take a panel and make it really something that's ours and not just
make it stand out. That's awesome.
So, and the other thing I wanted to show is last week I showed one of the quilts from the last class. This is one of the simpler ones. This is Linda's quilt. It's just beautiful.
Which way is that?
That's beautiful.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
And she opted to use some very subtle colors.
So soft.
Here, actually, I'll stand up if I can hold.
Okay. She opted to use some very subtle colors and it just came out beautifully. And it was amazing to me how obviously how different every quilt was. But this is the Jacob's Ladder. Pretty much just about a beginner quilt, really. And every one of them turned out beautifully.
She knocked it out of the park. It's so pretty. These are not, and I even told her because we were looking for fabric together and I was choosing some things. I think maybe we're a little out of her comfort zone. And then I came back, I was like, oh, you totally changed it, but it's so her.
Yes.
And I actually, surprisingly, I really love this color combination.
Yes, it turned out beautifully. And she is a fairly new quilter. And the whole time she's making it, she's saying, these pieces are so small. And now she's looking at making these
little
pieces,
things,
which are very small pieces. So she's come a long way in a short period of time.
It makes it easier when you have an amazing educator.
So
they have fun in that class. That's why I'm always going, there's not much room for anybody else because you're making these huge quilts, but we always want some fresh blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that we're sharing the quilts that they're making. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a great group of women and they're fun to work with. And every one of them is growing, no matter where they started as a quilter, they're growing and just turning out some really beautiful work.
That's awesome. All right. Marilee said, very good points. I didn't say good morning to Triss or Val or Katie. I don't know if you're still on there, or Linda. So good morning, everybody. And just we're wrapping up, but in case you didn't watch the beginning, there is a reason I'm wearing the Halloween shirt. So I'm going to say it again. It's Halloween in June, which is our Spooktacular June Jamboree.
Right.
It's 2 for 2. So this month is 25% off all Halloween fabric all month long, hence the fun shirt. Although I could probably pull this off just year round.
Radio that one, yeah.
Yes,
there's a few of them there a little while, but
if anyone could, you could.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not. Thank you. So awesome. These are great tips. Thanks for all of that as usual. We went over the classes. Is there anything else? I've been meaning to mention this at every single live that I do, and I haven't yet. So if you're bringing your machine in for service on a regular basis like you should, next time you come in, stop in and ask about this. We've created a service plan that will save you some money and give you some extra goodies and things. And I'm not going to give you the whole breakdown here, but please ask about this next time you're in, because it's so you're sewing on these amazing machines, making this amazing art. You need to take care of them. And too many people don't, or they're paying high dollar, for services and for small parts that we can save you some money and get you just a sweet deal. So ask about this next time you come in. That's all I'm going to say about that.
All right.
And that's it. We're done.
It's been fun.
It has been fun. You guys have an amazing week, and we will see you, if not sometime during the week. I say on Facebook Live, Saturday with Tony. We'll get on and talk about some classes. So have an amazing day. Take care, everybody.